Thank you.
Olá, boa tarde, bem-vindos ao evento de lançamento do Civic Space Scan em Portugal. Vamos ter hoje um evento com uma agenda muito interessante e espero que seja relevante para todos aqueles que nos vão acompanhar hoje. Este evento está a ser traduzido em simultâneo e podem aceder através do link do ícone em baixo e selecionar o idioma. Só a informação em inglês. This event is being translated at the same time, so you can access through the language bottom below. Hoje iremos fazer a apresentação desta reforma que pretende mudar os serviços públicos portugueses numa proposta que procura centrar as necessidades dos cidadãos nas políticas governamentais.
Centered in we want to operate these reforms in the public services in Portugal, and to start this session, Mrs. Fátima Fonseca, Secretary of State for Innovation and Administrative Modernization, is going to address you. So I pass you the floor. Thank you, Patricia. It's a pleasure. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Elsa Pilichowski and all the team in OECD and the LabX team that is supporting OECD in this project, and all the participants in this session for the launch of the Portugal Civic Space Scan. I'm going to address you in English.
Government and Civic Space Unit. It's always a pleasure to work with you, and a special thanks for your interest and engagement in this project, which is something that we are sure that will contribute to a more open, inclusive and accessible Portuguese public administration. Ora, prometidas, duas ou três palavras rápidas.
So a few background words and for the sponsoring of this project. The launch of this initiative marks a challenge that we are all awaiting, and we are very motivated. It's a project that has been developed in other countries already, but in our case, the characteristic is its focus on the delivery of public services in this, together with the open government and civic space. And we think it's an initiative that reinforces the strategy, the ongoing strategy for the design and delivery of inclusive public services, a strategy that is omni-channel with a focus on the real necessities of people, citizens and companies, and based on the respect of human rights. And on the ground of this premise, we are going on two essential models. This approach allows us to deconstruct what is a very conventional approach of service delivery based on departmental logic. And this is a battle that we need to fight, to place ourselves every day at the service of people, and the challenge of approaching intelligently the digital transformation and digital services since their beginning, and with a common model for the public administration in Portugal that was developed between different services in different entities, different people from our public administration, and that is based on a set of principles that are significant for these topics that we are going to discuss with the open government and civic space, and designing the service starting from the needs of the users and creating service easy to be used by the users, and that can develop an ecosystem of open data that can be valued by society. The strategy for innovation and modernization of state and Public Administration that was adopted in 2020. It was participated by the public administration as a whole and by society in a more global perspective, by companies, associations, the academia. And this strategy is based on this perspective of collaborative work and the transformation, a digital transformation that means transforming our organizations, not putting technology in organizations, but using it in a smart way to transform the way public administration works. And that's with this focus that we have designed a recovery and resilience plan that want to transform public administration. And one of the visible aspects of this transformation will be our next edition of the Simplex program that is going to show this paradigm of digital services for all. I would say that on the 10th of September, the government has published a resolution of the Ministers' Council that puts the accent on the significance of participative processes within the public administration and between the public administration and its outer perimeter. And this establishes the International Day of Participation in January 2022 and adopts a set of rules for the participative budget of Portugal, a national program with this third edition, and will encourage participative budgets to engage the workers in the dynamics of the transformation of their services. And we assume the centrality of participation in the models of public management, the participation of workers, participation of citizens. And these are some of the elements of our policy of action to have a more open and inclusive management and organization that ensures that our societies are societies where everyone would like to live in. And because we want to continue exploring the potential of these approaches, we see the Civic Space Scan as an important contribution for this pathway. And to understand the state of the art of the open participation of citizens, it will allow us to understand how we can evolve to reach the necessities of everyone. And I would like to stress that it was not by pure chance that along the Portuguese presidency of the Council of the EU, we have published a brochure with 9 principles to stimulate the approach to public services based on human rights, and LabX has been working on it, and we are going to use it in a cross-cutting way. And now to finish, dear friends, we are going through changing times, accelerated changes, but a change that needs to be smart and that needs to reflect the will of people concerning the world we want to live in. People and its governments need to create more space for civic participation, more proximity and collaboration between and with the entities of public administration. This project is therefore an important opportunity. So I thank the Observatory of Civic Space of OECD and the public national entities that are going to participate in this project, the health services and other that are involved in this project. But I thank all these people that are engaged in this project and that have contributed to its success. And I reaffirm the contribution of the government, and I wish you all an excellent working day, and also throughout the next weeks. And I hope we can meet again so to discuss about the results.
As always, in close collaboration, so that we can keep transforming the Portuguese public administration, building capacity for a more innovative public services. Thank you very much. See you soon. E até breve. Obrigada.
Muito obrigada pelas suas palavras.
Thank you, and for your words and presence and your support on this process. And now I'm going to give the floor to the Director of Public Governance from the OECD, Mrs. Elsa Pilichowski.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, Secretary of State Fonseca, for the opportunity to be here today. And I'd like to open by paying tribute to Portugal's leadership and your personal leadership in the area of public sector innovation and open government. As you personally, but Portugal as a country, have been particularly active member of the OECD Working Party on Open Government, and also co-chair of the OECD MENA Open and Innovative Governance Network. Portugal is very present on this agenda, very much in a leadership position, and we welcome that very much. And in that sense, I would also like to congratulate you for really volunteering for a Civic Space Scan by the Observatorium of Civic Space of the OECD. You are the second country to put yourselves forward on a scan, following our first pilot in Finland, and we really appreciate your commitment and vision in this area. Our work on the protection and promotion of civic space is really part of an ongoing dialogue among OECD countries on really how to strengthen their democracies. Earlier this month, on the occasion of the Ministerial Council meeting of the OECD, our members, the 38 members, adopted a new vision for the organization, and they did underline core values, including individual freedom, democracy, openness, transparency, among others. So it is, reinforcing democracy, including the civic space part, is really a priority area of our work as an organization. And 2 days ago, we had the Public Governance Committee that endorsed the idea of having a global forum on reinforcing democracy. And one of its focus areas is indeed on creating more effective avenues for inclusive citizen participation and representation in policymaking. So you are right on spot and right in a leading role internationally. And of course, this work comes against, of course, there's a reason for this work overall globally at the level of all OECD members, against, of course, a backdrop of a decrease in public satisfaction with the way democracies are functioning since the mid-1990s. Perception of how governments are serving citizens and how responsive they are to national and global challenges, such as COVID-19 or climate change, are really at the heart of this malaise. Democracies were already under strain before the pandemic. In 2020, only 51% of people in OECD countries said they trusted their government. And we know that there are further signs of decline since then. And so the disconnect between people and their institutions is a key challenge. So there has never been a better time, I think, in recent decades to ask questions about how citizens need, what citizens need and what they expect from their governments, and how governments can respond to those. So of course, we were absolutely delighted when LabX entrusted us with undertaking a scan of Portugal with a focus on applying human rights and civic space-based approach to public service reforms. I have to say that the team briefed me a few days ago entirely on the project, and I was really amazed by how innovative and again, how leading the way for other countries this project is. So really the novel framework that we're jointly developing will capture how key dimensions of human rights and civic space influence each and every stage of the service cycle, from planning to design, delivery, and oversight. This will allow us to better understand where breakdowns and bottlenecks occur, and how protected and open civic spaces, both online but also offline, can really improve the quality, the accessibility, and the take-up of public services. I'd like to focus on two specific aspects of the Civic Space Scan. First, as part of the overall process, we will facilitate a conversation with civil society and the public via interviews, surveys among users of public services, and the public consultation. Giving citizens a more meaningful role in reform efforts is an important part of increasing government openness, responsiveness, and the quality and reach of its services. Recognizing these benefits, governments are increasingly turning to the public to assist them in this area. For example, in New Zealand, the government launched a consultation process on public service reforms back in 2018. In Ireland, the government held a consultation on citizens' difficulties when interacting with the state digitally. In France, ongoing public service reforms have been informed by members of a youth public action committee comprising students and young professionals. Second aspect I would like to focus is the human rights-based approach that is really at the heart of our civic space scans, and that is really fundamental to improving representation and inclusive participation. Our approach recognizes governments as duty bearers with clear obligations to respect individual rights, and places the principle of non-discrimination at the heart of public sector initiatives and service provision. This is really particularly important in order to engage groups that may feel left behind or unable to access public services, in order also to channel their views and needs into the reform process. We know from our research that in every society, there are obstacles to full participation in accessing opportunities and services. They are of a different nature depending on the society we're in, but there are difficulties everywhere. So this can affect women as well as ethnic or linguistic minorities such as Roma or migrant populations, non-white populations due to racism, or economically and socially disadvantaged groups, including youth or rural isolated communities. Even in advanced democracies such as Portugal or Finland, where we just completed a civic space scan in June, these obstacles may present may be present in society, and civic space scans can help to uncover first and then propose policies and other public sector initiatives to really overcome them. Based on the evidence from our work on public participation for the past 10 years, we're really confident that the civic space scan will help Portugal to deliver more citizen-centered services that better respond to evolving needs. And finally, we believe that the learning and tools from this scan will be relevant and of great interest, of course, to other countries. I mentioned that you're really in a leadership position here. And we're particularly pleased about having the opportunity to test the application of the methodology for the OECD civic space scans to service delivery with Portugal's Administrative Modernization Agency, AMA, and look really forward to learning from the scan with other countries in support of citizen-centered services and stronger democratic governance. Once again, thank you very much, Secretary of State Fonseca, for inviting me to this launch, and really congratulations again to Portugal for engaging in the process. Thank you very much.
Muito obrigada. Agradecemos também a presença e esta oportunidade.
Thank you. We thank you for your presence and your collaboration in this process, which is a possibility to increase the quality of our services. And to give you a background of these objectives and this evaluation process, I will invite my colleague Georges Lagarde from LabX to see in the context of Portugal, to show us the importance of the participation of the design of public services and the digital transition that needs to be inclusive. I give you the floor, George. Thank you, Patricia. Good afternoon, everyone. Mrs. Secretary of State, our colleague Elsa, and organizations of civil society. It's interesting to see the number of people who have shown interest in this initiative. This is quite rewarding. And more than presenting the activities and methodologies used in the public space, I would like to show you how our methodology tries to respond to these needs to look at the design of new public services in a perspective based on human rights. I'm going to share my screen. Just a minute. I think you are already viewing it. Why an approach based on human rights? To promote more active civic participation in Portugal. We like to reivindicate our rights, and what we've seen up to now, when we are called to participate, we have difficulty engaging citizens, maybe because they lack confidence, because we don't understand quite well what is the grounds of these initiatives, and our concern in promoting these participative initiatives, or these initiatives around the participative budgets that are coming back this year. But it's a fundamental objective of LabX and AMA to participate, to encourage this participation. And the ONET 18 that is now coming into force to accelerate the state services and to develop a new generation of public services adapted to the real necessities and expectations of citizens. In LabX, we work on this component, design of services, based on humans and the necessities of citizens, but we need to become more effective in the assessment process, and so the services can respond to these necessities, and basically to ensure that we have a transformative process that is more digital and leaves no one behind. We have the digital by default. We use the potentialities of the new technologies, but we need to ensure that all sectors of society can access these services. We have public services that are exclusively online, but it's necessary to ensure that all sectors of society, all people, all citizens can have access to these services in a friendly user's way, without necessity for intermediaries and without a need to get by or ask for help to someone around. And these are our three main objectives in these approaches based on human rights. And what are the initiatives we are developing? Beyond the Civic Space Scan, we have some guiding principles for an approach to public services based on human rights. We have thought in this, in our team and within the organization, implementation. These principles have been subject to tests and validation in a collaborative session developed in the INOX and governance practice in June, with the participation of the colleagues from the Observatory of the Civic Space of OECD and the colleagues from the European Union. And we could validate our work and add some value to what we had already imagined. 9 main principles to ensure the approach based on human rights in the services, promote the participation of citizens in all phases of the process, design these services for more deprived populations, and to understand the consequences of the implementation of the service, and in data protection to ensure the privacy of private data, and to consider some evil cases of use of data, and we need to look at that at the moment of its design and not later on when they surge up. We have 9 principles here, guiding principles defined as the grounds for our methodology for assessment of these services. We have the implementation of a project linked with the memory of the Holocaust that have allowed for the development of some tools and methodology adapted to the development of services based on human rights. It was something we had already in mind. Our methodology of these tools are focused on participation, engagement of citizens, engagement of officials, of employees, and to develop services that address the necessities. And we want to go even further into greater depth. Look at the consequences of the implementation of a service. These are tools we are preparing, and we will have some new novelties at the end of November. The Civic Space Scan, its main objective is to understand what is the state of affairs in Portugal concerning civic participation and involvement of participation of citizens in the design of the services, because the services are designed for the citizens and they need to be facilitators for the exercise of their citizenship. They cannot create obstacles because of their they are very slow, they have bottlenecks, sometimes they are not as accessible as I would wish them to be. And to start, we are going to look at 3 services that will serve as the model for this approach. The mobile digital key activation, 3 services, the demand request for a family allowance for children and young people, and to book consultation in USF. And these 3 services, we need to incorporate them in our methodology, in our practices and projects, all these learnings, and to make sure that this monitoring of the services and respecting the basic and fundamental rights, they need to be present in all the stages of the implementation of the services, and it's something that needs to be there. And we need to promote all these technologies, the use of the new tools, and to follow up this process of digital transformation with the concern of not letting anyone behind. And how are we going to operate this civic space scan? And now I'm going to pass the floor to the colleagues that are going to present the methodology and the activities that we are going to carry out. Thank you for your attention. And I pass on to you, Patricia. I pass the floor to Elsa McAvoy that is going to show us this methodology of assessment and all the steps that we are going to follow.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Very happy to be here with you today, and a special thanks to our counterparts in AMA for organizing this event. So my name is Claire McAvoy, and I lead the work on civic space, on the protection of civic space at the OECD. And I'm delighted to be here to tell you a little bit more about our plans for the Civic Space Scan and to answer any questions that you may have. So here's a little overview of the presentation today. So we'll spend the next 10-15 minutes looking at what the project is about. We've already heard quite a bit already, but I'll just tell you a little bit more. The next steps for the project, what to expect during the interviews. We hope that many of you here today will be part of our interview process, and we want you to be able to come to those interviews relaxed, knowing who we are, what the project is about, so that we can have a really good conversation. And of course, we want to be able to answer all of your questions. So let's start with a look at what the project is about. Next slide. So on your screen, you have a very brief description of the main objective of this project. So in short, the aim is to assess how protected civic spaces, both online and offline, can contribute to more inclusive, responsive, citizen-centered public services in Portugal. So that's sort of the headline, if you like. Now, in order for you to understand this, I'm going to go in a bit more detail to explain what civic space is. What are we talking about when we talk about civic space? It's essentially an umbrella term. The definition is on the left of your screen. So it's an umbrella term for citizens' ability to access information, inform themselves, organize themselves, and voice their opinions, and of course their criticisms of on any matter, and take part in what we call public life, public decision-making, and policy-making. So we know that when basic rights, such as freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, freedom of association, and non-discrimination, when these rights are respected, we know that citizens and non-governmental actors are able to become involved in service design and delivery cycle, and that this can help to improve services because it helps to improve inclusion, it helps to improve equal access, and the degree to which services actually respond to the real needs of the people. So this human rights-based approach, as we've already heard, it is embedded in our SCAN methodology. And it recognizes that every person, as we've heard, should have an equal right to access services, and of course to have their voice heard on those services, that everyone's voice is fundamental. And of course, this is a priority for your government. So here, let's move on and talk a little bit more about the dimensions of civic space that we look at so that you can understand in more detail. So on your screen, you have 4 pillars in front of you. These are the 4 key areas that we go into some detail on in our analysis. And under each pillar, we give you some examples of the areas we will be asking questions on. And now I'm not going to read them, but you can see that there's quite a broad range. And what we intend to do is to take a look at the protection of civic space in Portugal in general, so the macro level issues and challenges, and apply the learning from that to look at the three particular services that George mentioned. In other words, we'll get the macro level challenges and we will then apply them to the sectoral or service level. So let me make this a bit concrete for you so that we can all understand. So for example, by understanding whether press freedoms are broadly respected in Portugal, whether journalists are able to operate freely without interference, whether they're subjected to harassment or violence, whether they can openly hold the government to account for decision-making, we can better understand how press freedom and indeed freedom of expression can contribute to service reforms more broadly. By understanding whether there are supportive legal frameworks and policy frameworks in place for civil society in Portugal, whether they can access funding, whether they're able to operate freely, we can also, and also share their areas of expertise with the government, we can better understand how they can contribute to service reforms, and in particular, the three that we'll be looking at. And by understanding whether Portugal has institutionalized mechanisms for engaging citizens and civil society in decision-making, and whether it consults with marginalized and underrepresented groups, we can better understand how to make these three public services and public services more broadly, more inclusive and more citizen-centered. And of course, as part of our analysis, we will be looking in depth at Portugal's 9 guiding principles, which we've just heard about. Next slide, please. So let me just say a little bit about our approach to service design and delivery, and then we will move on to the more practical part of the presentation. So when we talk about the service delivery cycle, we're referring to 4 key stages, and these are on the screen in front of you: planning, design, delivery, and evaluation. And all of these, of course, are deeply interconnected. And our study will look at each stage in some detail. We will map out each of the 3 services to understand when and where different groups may be effectively excluded, and when and where and how citizens are consulted on each of those phases, and where the openings are for reforms to be made and for the services to become more inclusive as a result. And as part of this, as we've already heard, there will be a key focus on issues around discrimination and inequalities, to try to understand these, to understand where bottlenecks are, and to make suggestions on how to overcome these, so that the services become accessible to all people, no matter their profile, their age, their gender, any kind of disability, etc. We'll be looking at an omni-channel approach as part of a focus on digital maturity, with a view to the development of inclusive integrated services. And our focus will basically be on understanding a user's journey from the first attempt at contacting a service right through to the end, to resolving the problem, addressing the experiences at the front end of the service or online, as well as the back end, as a continuum, to really understand and towards a consistency of access and experience across and among all services. So what are the next steps for the project? As you can see, sorry, just go back one slide, please. Yeah, previous. So these are the 3 services. We've already been told about them by George, so I won't dwell on them. But just to note that they do affect a large section of the population in Portugal, which is great. So we believe that the learning from these 3 case studies will be relevant across the entire public sector. So let's look at the next steps for the project. So we have 3 phases here on your screen. We're in phase 1 now, where we're undertaking research. We are launching a public consultation, which I will come back to in a moment. We're launching that today, just now after this session, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a second. We hope to undertake surveys of people who actually use the services in question, and we hope to start what we call a fact-finding mission, hopefully in November. And as part of that, we'll be undertaking a series of interviews, we hope, with many of you who are present here today. Phase 2 will be then the drafting phase. And we will undertake that between sort of roughly November and April. And then we hope to publish our report by around June of 2022. So perhaps this is the most important part of this presentation today. We wanted to tell you a little bit about what to expect during the interviews. So basically, the interviews will last about an hour. There will be, what we aim for is a free and open discussion guided by us, by a series of questions. We will not quote you at any point. We use what we call Chatham House rules, which means we never include names of people we interviewed. And we, in our report, and we encourage you to be as, as frank as possible. The more frank you are, the more we can learn from you. So we're looking for a very open conversation. And we'll be interviewing government officials. Separately, we will also speak with civil society, journalists, academia, private sector, etc. So we'll get a really broad range of views on the subjects that we're looking at. And of course, for now, because of COVID, these interviews will be online. Let me just say a word about peer reviewers. We're very fortunate to have Estonia and the UK joining our interviews. So you may find that people from public officials from both countries are sitting in on interviews when you take part. And this is great because this will allow us to benefit from their expertise and good practices from those countries, which will, of course, and their general insights, which will be included in our report. So we're very pleased about that. So when we do these presentations, people often want to know, next slide, what kind of questions to expect on the day. So we've included some here on this slide and the next. Here we have some general questions on civic space, and on the next one, civic space and public services. So this is just to give you an idea. Basically, we will follow your lead. So we'll probably open with a general question and then, about your work, your role, etc. And then perhaps on challenges, and then we will follow your lead and get into in depth about your particular area of work. But just to give you some examples of the kinds of issues that we'll be looking at, for example, what Portugal's strategic vision is underpinning the promotion of civic space and public service reforms. We'll be asking about the oversight mechanisms for civic freedoms, how well they actually work in practice, how accessible they are they funded well, is the quality and impact of their work assessed by the government, how the government involves or consults citizens and stakeholders generally in decision making, who it engages with, what tools does it use, what does it do with the feedback, etc., etc. We will share this presentation with you, so you'll be able to take a look. And if we move on to the next slide, here are some questions where we zone in more on the public service angle. So as an example, are all members of the public equally able to access information on the three services? Are some groups effectively excluded? And if they are, what are the obstacles? Do citizens using different channels, for example, online versus in person, do they have different experiences of the public services? And what actions does the government take to ensure inclusive and non-discriminatory participation in the public services? And are there effective grievance redress mechanisms in place to handle complaints where complaints are made? So again, just some examples, some of the issues for you to perhaps think about and relate to your own areas of work. Next slide. So here we have an opportunity for questions. Feel free to ask anything. I'm here. Obviously, there are also other members of the team. If you would like to share any initial reflections, of course, on challenges that you feel we should look into, that is also most welcome. And before I hand over, just to say that in front of you is the link to the public consultation that we are launching today as part of this scan. So we are asking a number of questions to the public, to anyone, any person in Portugal, any CSO, civil society, or just any ordinary person. And we're asking a series of questions on how Portugal can strengthen its commitment to civic space, to civil society, and indeed participation in those services that we've been talking about. So we would appreciate any help with disseminating this, the word, getting the word out about this public consultation. If you could help us to distribute within your networks, we would be very grateful. We would like to hear from as many people as possible. So with that, and there's the link gone into the chat. Thank you so much. Thank you for your attention. And we're here to answer any questions that you may have.
Muito obrigada, Claire.
Thank you, Claire. We don't have many questions yet, but we have a suggestion asking if we can engage local municipalities, local powers, and maybe George can answer this question. Thank you, Patricia. I don't know if Claire wants to say anything, but in the framework of this Civic Space Scan, we are going to do a consultation of the municipalities, the Association of Municipalities. They are going to be interviewed in the context of this Civic Space Scan, but there will be maybe a contamination process. It's not a good word, but well, they are going to pass the word, and they will slowly start activating these processes.
If I might add, we would certainly be interested in undertaking some interviews to get the local level perspective, although most of our interviews will focus on the national level.
Muito obrigada.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the next stages of the project. It's going to involve a lot of work, but it's going to be rewarding. And all the speakers have said that we will need the participation of all in this public consultation, so all will be able to contribute to this process that is so important for all of us. I'm going now to move on to the final remarks, and Alexandro Bellantoni, I'd like him to join us for the discussion.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you very much. I was just waiting for the interpretation to finish. It's a great pleasure. I mean, I don't have much to add. I must say that between the minister, our director, George and Claire, I think they gave you a very, very detailed and in-depth idea of what this project will consist of. I can only perhaps stress that we feel that the contamination between the service, the more traditional public service delivery area of work and the civic space set of principles and rights, both from a, I would say, traditional offline, but also online digital perspective, it's really rich. This project is a bit of an experimentation, and we are very happy to partner with LabX because they are the expert of these innovative approaches. From our perspective, we feel we can draw on the traditional work that DCT has been doing in service delivery, in digital government, in citizens' participation and civic space. But this lens that put all this together is new, and we believe it will be rich. And what we particularly like about it is how it puts citizens and their rights at the center of the reflection of the public administration on how to serve them better. So we are, of course, grateful of the choice of Portugal to work with us. And we're also convinced that the results of this work will be of inspiration for OECD members, European countries, and beyond. Nowadays, especially in a moment where we are reimagining the way governments and citizens need to collaborate. Clearly, COVID gave a very important boost to that need, but also digital technologies and a new awareness of what the rights of citizens are. I think all this give the public sector a certain new role in which they need to make the extra step to go towards the citizens, to put them at the center of the work, to collaborate with them, to open up to them in a way that is not a dichotomy. It's not public sector on the one end and citizens on the other, but it's more like in the context of a collaboration. And for this collaboration to happen, the civic liberties that are at the heart of civic space, of human rights, etc., are necessary preconditions that need to be there for citizens and civil society and the private sector to play their part. So our scan will look at this and beyond. We can't wait to start. Please do feel fully engaged in the process. Claire described the methodology. There will be interviews, there will be online surveys and engagement activities, but we're also really available to be contacted bilaterally to discuss what we are doing and the results of our assessments, and especially how to transform those into recommendations that hopefully will be implemented by you in the future and by our members, taking inspiration from you. So again, thank you very much, Minister Fonseca. Thank you very much, Ama, who has been an important partner of the OCDE for many years, and thank you very much, LabX, to whose director, Ms. Elsa Bello, I am happy to give the floor now.
Muito obrigada pelas suas palavras de incentivo.
Thank you for encouraging words, and thank you for mentioning this collaboration in LabX. We are very grateful and we are looking forward to working with you. And to close the session, we will pass the floor to the head of LabX. Good afternoon. Thank you for this session. Thank you for being here. We are getting to the end, but we would like to close this session by reinforcing our commitment to this project and the promotion of an approach based on human rights. But for that, we need to ensure everyone's engagement of all public entities and civic society. All entities are going to be contacted as of next week with an invitation to participate in this process with us and the OECD. And we need the participation of all to fulfill the objectives we have set ourselves. And this collective effort to continue this transformative process to make sure we don't leave anyone behind in this movement of digital transformation. And these guiding principles and the methodologies on the Civic Space Scan, we want to integrate all these learnings in our methodology and the design of public services for this new generation of services to be focused on the needs of our citizens, not leaving anyone behind. Thank you, and I pass you the floor, Patricia. Thank you. In this discussion and in the chat, we have a few questions that we would like to answer. We want to thank everyone for their presence. It was a very enriching session, and at LabX we are all ready to collaborate. You can always contact us through our email. And to close the session, we would like you to assess the session. We are going to share it, the link in here in the chat. And if you want certificates for your presence here, we can issue them. And thank you and see you soon. But please participate.